Hello YouTube, you're looking at the stock stereo of a 2004 Chevy Aveo. If you have this model, or one of the first few years that the Chevy Aveo was made, you know that there was not any kind of an aux jack put in place for these vehicles so that you could hook up an iPhone, an iPod, or an MP3 player to listen to it in your car. So there are some options that you have if you want to add that functionality to this vehicle. Option 1, deal with it and listen to headphones. Option 2, use an FM transmitter to wirelessly transmit the signal of your device to your FM receiver. I've tried this on this car and it sounds like total crap, so that really wasn't an option for me. Option 3 is to replace the stereo with an aftermarket stereo that has an aux jack built into the front of it. Kind of expensive. Option 4 is to modify the stereo. I'm going to go over that fourth option. We're going to take a 3.5mm cable and directly splice it into the audio signal of the unit's CD player. I have a disclaimer. I'm not responsible for any of your screw-ups. This process can result in injury and damage to your vehicle, your stereo, or your MP3 player or iPhone. I'm not responsible for any of those things. If you have any doubts about your ability to do this procedure, hire a professional. That being said, let's get started. First thing we got to do is get this stereo out. There's going to be two panels on either side of this stereo. They are basically just plastic panels, and we are going to need to pry them out. I used two tools, a flathead screwdriver which I wrapped in electrical tape, and a junk credit card. Take the screwdriver and wedge it into the very top of the side piece and pry it out. The top half of the side piece should come out. From there, you can gently work your way down using your credit card as a guide to wedge between the two pieces and pop the bottom section of the trim panel out. Do the same thing for the left trim panel. Once the trim panels have been taken off, the stereo is inside by 4 screws, 2 screws on each side. Use a Phillips screwdriver to remove these screws. Once you've taken out the stereo, you'll notice a wiring harness and an antenna cable. Remove those 2 cables and you should have the unit free. Place the stereo onto a flat, secure surface. At this point, I just want to go over all the options one more time. What you want to do is take a close look at the back of your stereo to see all the different options you have for connectivity. Sometimes a stereo may very well have a method of hooking up an aux cable directly into the back via RCA jacks, but that wasn't the case with mine. I looked at the wiring harness, which is the white harness on the right-hand side, and there really wasn't any way to interface into that. Next to the wiring harness is a circular 8-pin DIN cable. It looks like it was used for a manufacturer's CD changer or something along those lines. I would love to use this, but pin 4 is suspicious. Data. What is data? Well, I have no idea what they mean by data. I don't have schematics. I really don't know how to link up to that data port. So using this port may not be feasible. That's why I decided to tap the aux jack directly into the CD player unit. Since I don't really know much about how to tap into this unit's preamp or AM/FM radio, the CD player is probably a separate unit with free wires that we have room to work with, and that's why I chose to go this route. At this point, we're going to take a look at some of our tools. I have a 6-foot long 3.5mm aux jack, which I got at Radio Shack for about $7.50. I'm using a 30-watt chisel tip soldering iron, and I have some 0.65 6040 rosin core solder, pretty standard stuff. I've also got some electrical tape, but what I'd rather use is this little tube of heat shrink. The heat shrink will basically shrink over our wires, but if we run out of that heat shrink, I can use electrical tape if we need to. These things are optional. I'd rather use heat shrink, but if needed, I can use these to twist the wires together. I got some typical wire cutters, an assortment of Phillips and flathead screwdrivers, along with a jeweler's tip flathead and a jeweler's tip Phillips screwdriver for delicate small work. Got a small pair of side cutters, a pair of needle nose pliers, and a multimeter. This looks really huge. I mean, it does a lot of stuff, but all you need is a simple multimeter that can give you a good continuity test. You want a multimeter that will give you an audible beep whenever there is a connection between the two leads. Put one lead on the aux jack lead and the other lead on the end of the terminating cable to make sure there's a good connection. What I plan to do is run this cable into the stereo, and then it'll come out to you through the back end of this little empty cubby hole right below the stereo. This will require me to drill a small hole into the back of that cubby hole, which is why I have a small drill on the table. You could be more elegant than this and actually make a legitimate jack mounted onto your dashboard, but that's not something that I decided to do. Looking at the side of this unit, we have two screws on each side which attach the cubbyhole assembly to the stereo. We're going to take those out. With the cubbyhole assembly removed, we can take the stereo off. Now, we need to get into this thing. First, remove the heatsink. The heatsink is held onto the stereo by 4 screws. Keep in mind that there is a little bit of thermal paste between the heatsink and the stereo, so don't get that thermal paste on your clothing or your table. Now, using a medium flathead screwdriver, pry up the top cover using the little slots in the back corner. In my case, they were etched open with an arrow, so it was very obvious where to put your screwdriver to open it from. Once they're both pried up on both sides, you can just lift up the cover, and you just go ahead and repeat this for both the top cover and the bottom cover. When the bottom cover is exposed, it looks like this. There's lots of bare circuits here. Do not touch it. To take off the faceplate, there is one screw on each side of the faceplate that I had to remove, and then just gently tug it off. You'll notice 2 Molex connectors that hook up the faceplate to the unit. In my case, there were also 2 wires that were screwed into the faceplate. I'm not sure if these were for grounding or if they were some kind of a mechanism that was meant for anti-theft. In any case, I'm going to leave those 2 wires be since I now have access to what I want, the CD player. You can see that the CD player is an entirely separate unit that we're going to be able to take out just by taking out some screws.